except maybe the ones on the back page. We'll talk about those. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and plot these points. So if you have this version of the quiz, it's negative 5, 11, which would be about right there. So that's A. Then negative 2, negative 3, which would be there. And 7, 3, which would be there. So there's A, B, and C. And you might notice, if you have the other version of the quiz, what did I do to all these numbers? Yeah, or I actually, well, yeah, I added 1. I actually started with the other one and subtracted 1, but yes. So I just add 1 to all these numbers, which means the picture, what would happen to this triangle that I drew if I add 1 to the x and y? It's gonna shift. It would shift right 1 and up 1. So your picture should look essentially the same either way, which means you're going to have the same distances, the same slopes. And so most of the answers will be exactly the same. So here's my triangle. You'll notice it's not a right triangle. That's okay. It doesn't need to be a right triangle. So if you did that, give yourself a point. Now, part 2, we want to find the distance from A to B using the Pythagorean theorem. So to use the Pythagorean theorem, we would like to make a right triangle. And it's not absolutely necessary that you draw it. In fact, it's great if you can do this in your head without having to draw the picture. But here's what we're doing. We're making a right triangle, not from the original triangle that we drew, but just using side AB, the one we're trying to find the distance of, as the hypotenuse. So there's the right triangle. And then you can just count how long each leg is. Matt? Maybe. I'll look at it in a little bit, but probably. Because it's the same as the distance one. It's the same. Okay, so how long is this side? Well, you can count. It's 14, right? And then how long is this side? 1, 2, 3. And how do you do the Pythagorean theorem? Well, you do a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So in this case, we would take the 14 squared plus the 3 squared equals the distance squared. Square each of those, that's 196. That's 9. Add them together, that's 205. And what do we do as the last step? Yes, we square root it. And this would be the exact answer. So the distance is exactly the square root of 205. Okay? And so as you're grading this, what you want to see is, maybe you made it here. Okay, you're using the Pythagorean theorem. That's good, but maybe you did everything else wrong somehow. Then you might get a half point. Let's say you did everything right, except you lost track when you were counting and you counted to 15 or 13 instead of 14. You're doing the right thing, you just had trouble counting, so I would call that a little mistake, and you can give yourself 3/4 like that. Okay? Make sense? Alright. Any other questions there? Then let's try number 2. So number 2, we're doing basically the same thing, only we're going to call it the distance formula this time. And really the point here is that they're the same thing. So here we're looking for the distance from A to C. I'm going to make that a right triangle. And instead of counting to figure out how long each side is, we subtract. And to subtract, we use the x and the y values from A and C. See if I can keep from using the wrong ones. Okay. So we're going to use the values from A and C to figure out how long the legs of the right triangle are. How long are they? I don't know. Let me find out. So this we would call the run, and this the rise. And those are things you know how to find from algebra, from the slope formula. So essentially we're going to do the run squared plus the rise squared equals the distance squared. It's the Pythagorean theorem, only we're actually subtracting to find those distances. That's what the distance formula is. So let's do that. Okay. So to find the run, remember that's the difference in the x values. How do I find the difference between two numbers? And then the rise is the difference in the y values. So we subtract again. Now all we have to do is try and plug in the right numbers. Out of all of these numbers, try and make sure and plug in the right one, not the wrong one. Okay? So to help me with that, I'm going to go ahead and label these. I'm going to call this one up here x1 and y1, that point, and I'm going to call this point x2 and y2. Those labels help me not make mistakes, although they don't guarantee that I don't make a mistake. So x2, I said, would be 7 minus x1, which would be minus a negative 5, which makes it a plus 5. And of course, if you had 8, 4 and negative 4, 12, your numbers are going to be a little bit different, but it should look essentially the same. And then subtract the two y values. So 3 minus 11. Okay. And I'm running out of room, so I'm going to work on this scratch paper here. So that's 12 squared. Can you still see it? Plus negative 8 squared. And from here, it's essentially just like the Pythagorean theorem. So that's 144, and that is 64. And you should have those same numbers regardless of which set of points you're using. So that adds up to 208. And then as the last step, yes, sir. Okay, give me just one second. And so as the last step, we take the square root and leave it like that. Don't plug it in your calculator. This is the exact answer. So if you didn't write the square root of 208, you wrote 14.3 or whatever it is. I'd give you 3/4 credit for that. That's a little mistake. So those are the two answers. Any questions there? Do we all feel okay about those? Good.